Hey everybody, Ron Metches here again. Well, it's time for another episode of De-Rusting a Meteorite Slice. I have a large slice of Toluca here. This thing's roughly 8 to 10 inches long. I haven't measured it. But notice there's some rust in this area here and down in this area where the inclusions are. And also, inspecting it a little closer, there's rust getting down into the grain structure. This thing has a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous grain structure to it. But it's not very contrasting, so I'm going to re-etch it in the process. So we're going to throw this into the electrolysis tank, use a standard procedure, modify it a little bit. I've been doing some more reading, got some tips. We're going to take the coating off, go through the whole process of re-etching, recoating, and see what the results are. So let's get to it. All right, so I'm in the process of getting set up here now. I've got all my equipment laid out. For starters, I have my DC power supply. This particular one happens to be a Xantrec 60-9. It has 60 volts, 9 amp capability, but we're not going anywhere near that. We'll be using about 12 volts, maybe an amp or so. Got a larger tank so that the part fits in there very nicely. Got some graphite plates used as the cathodes. Iron wire, a couple of clamps to hold the graphite plates in place. And to make the water a little basic and conductive, we got some pH up here. It's got some sodium carbonate in it. You can see that right there. It's just a spa chemical for raising the pH of the water. Got the piece right here, some wire to connect the power supply to the circuit. Piece of rebar is going to go across the top here, so that'll act as the anode that I can connect the power supply to. So also over in the corner here, I'm using distilled water. Any brand will do. So I think I'm ready to start. Got everything I need, and let's get it all hooked up. After thinking about this setup for a little bit, I've decided to make a small change. We're going to take this rebar out, and instead I'm going to try and use a piece of copper pipe, 1/2 inch. It's going to go across here, and the wire is going to hang down into the water to attach the meteorite to. So this shouldn't make any difference as far as the circuitry goes, and the advantage is it won't rust on me. The rebar has a tendency to rust because of the water vapor and whatnot. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen here. This may be a little different. I've never seen anybody do this before, so who knows? Maybe I've got something new. Who knows? So let's get to it. The first order of business I wanted to get done is this piece has a protective coating on it, some kind of spray, lacquer, or something. It's got to be removed because if I leave it on there, it inhibits the electrolysis process. So I have to take this off because it is kind of an insulator. Now to do that, it's very simple. A little bit of acetone wiped on, and it removes almost any kind of coating. So we'll do that first just to prepare the surface for the electrolysis. All right, so let's get busy getting the coating off of here. Got me a rag, of course I'm wearing nitrile gloves. Got my acetone. Let's get a little bit on this rag here and just start washing it off. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Should go all around the edges. Of course, whatever you don't get off here will come off in the electrolysis process. This doesn't have to be 100%. It's just the better job you do, the faster the thing will get done. Okay. Next, we're going to wrap this in wire. All right, so I've unwound a length of wire here, probably way more than I need, but stuff's cheap, so I don't mind using a little bit too much. Off of there, put this away, and now we're going to wrap this just a couple of times, doesn't have to be a lot, in there. I got the piece completely wrapped in wire now. That's enough contact to make sure I got continuity. So I got a nice long piece of here to hang it from the copper pipe. So let's make sure we have continuity from the meteorite through to the wire. Make sure we're good. There we go. That beep means we have continuity. 0 ohms. Close to 0. Okay, so that means we're good to go. All right, so that part's done. I've attached the meteorite and the wire to the copper pipes. Now we're going to see if we have continuity through the pipe to the meteorite. So here we go. Perfect. Got a nice tone. All right, you're good to go. All right, so I've hooked the system up. Now I have the negative of the power supply going to the cathode, which is the copper pipe. I have the two anodes, which is the two graphite plates, hooked up in parallel. And so we're going to turn the power on, set it to 12 volts rather, and see if there's any current. Right now I haven't made the electrolyte yet. So let's turn this on. And I'm going to set this to about 12 volts. That seems to be a nice number. And 11 and 12. And notice there's no current flowing. Okay, so now what I have to do is I have to put in my pH up, and you should start to see current start to flow. And as they get it mixed in, you'll see more and more current begin to flow. So just a little capful is all it takes. Sprinkle it around. All right, so we're already seeing a little bit of current going, but we'll get much more. Let's stir this up a little bit. And it's starting to increase. It should get up to about 1 amp, ideally. That's where I like to have it. There's 0.2. All right, still not all dissolved yet. I used to use liquid, but I couldn't find it at the spa store they run out, so I had to use the solid stuff. It takes a little longer to mix up. All right, let's put a bit more in. See, we're topped out at about 0.3 of an amp. There we go. It's going up already. Usually I mix this up before I put the water in. I used about, for this piece, around 3 gallons of water. Tune that to 3 gallons, based on the size. Okay, we're up to 0.5 amp. Still going up. Now, we should be able to see bubbles starting to form on all the electrodes. And open cathode up to 0.6. Still going. 0.65, 0.66. Okay, looks like we need a little bit more. Okay, a little more. We should do it. Smaller pieces doesn't. Oh, there we go. Now it's up to 0.8 of an amp. Usually takes a big jump when you put that in. 0.9, 0.9 amps. There we go. That should be about 1 amp. If it goes over, it's okay. There's 1 amp. Okay, that's where we like to have it. As the reaction proceeds, it'll probably go above that, 1.05. That's a nice number right there. So now I'm starting to see bubbles form on the meteorite slice. Also, I see bubbles forming over here and over here. So that means our reaction is working. Let's take this in a little closer. You can see bubbles forming on the meteorite slice on that side and that side. And that's the reason I use 2 slices of graphite, so I can do both sides at once. Otherwise, I have to do one side and then turn it around and do the other side. This is more efficient. Now we have bubbles forming here. You can see little fine bubbles forming there. And some forming down here. Now, this is a bigger operation because you're generating both hydrogen and oxygen, which are both extremely explosive. It's good to have some ventilation going. This is such a minute amount. I'm not too concerned, but I'm going to turn a fan on across the room anyway, just to blow some air through here to keep it circulating. So now all we have to do is sit back and wait. I suspect this is going to be, I'll give it a week, see what happens. But what's going to happen, the water's going to turn black as the graphite begins to slough off the bars, because they're actually depositing the graphite on the iron. That'll sand off later very easily. So we are in good shape. We're good to go. All right, so it's been about a week now. We're going to turn the power supply off and see what this thing looks like. So let's turn that off and take this out of the bath. The water's black as all get out, so it's been sloughing off pretty well. So now we have a piece that looks like this. It's actually got a pretty nice etch to it, but we have a lot of graphite plated on there, which is what the electrolysis process does. So we're going to sand it, but first let's take the wire off, see what it looks like. I removed the copper pipe, so let's take this wire off of here. We'll just clip it off. Makes it much easier. All right. Start with a little bugger. There we go. All right, so here's what we have. You see that kind of grayish haze on there is the, oh, it's got a lot more of this stuff come out. I found out these inclusions are ferric sulfate, which has a little bit of metal in there. And they tend to, along the edges, corroding along the edges, but I expected that. You always lose some material during this process. All right, so here's what we have. Still kind of gray. The next step is to kind of dry it out a little bit so it doesn't rust up on me again. We're going to do that with a heat gun. I've taken an old leftover piece of ceramic tile we had left over from a tile job we did at our house some years ago, and that's going to become my work surface. So here's the piece we're going to do. Now I've taken my heat gun and I've put a little attachment on there that spreads the heat out so we don't concentrate the heat too much in one area. So let's go ahead and dry this guy out. Won't take very long. Yeah, I've turned the piece over and we're heating up the other side. When I turned it over, I had to use a glove, so it's very hot right now. I used to do this in an oven, but the oven seemed to turn the metal brown in some cases, depending on the meteorite. So another guy that does this kind of work says to use a heat gun because it's a much quicker process and it doesn't let that chemical reaction, whatever it is, interact with a gas oven. We'll finish this up. All right, so I've now gotten it completely heated. I'll let it cool down for a bit. Right now, let's see what we have. So the rust appears to be all gone. I don't see anything, even looks like a rust area. So I think we're going to be good for now. The next step of the process is to sand the piece back towards the base metal. So I'm using my orbital sander. I'm going to use a series of sandpapers. I'm going to start with 320, go to 400, 800, and normally I would stop here because that's just fine. It gives you plenty mirror finish. But this time I'm going to try some 2000 to see what happens. All right, so I'll get the sandpaper loaded up and let's get started. All right, let's get started with the 320 grit paper. All right, we're done with the 320. As you can see, the etch is gone, getting back to the base metal very nicely. Nice and smooth, so now we're going to go up to 400. All right, let's start the 400 grit polish. So we're finished with the 400 grit. It's getting smoother, a little bit more of a mirror finish. Not quite there, but definitely getting smoother. So on to the 800 grit. All right, so we're starting the 800 grit now. All right, we're done with the 800 grit. It's getting nice and smooth and shiny. You can actually see the camera and my face in there, so we're getting towards the mirror finish. Normally this is where I would stop, but we're going to go one more step this time, just because I want to experiment a little bit. On to 2000 grit. All right, moving on to 2000 grit. We're done with the 2000 grit. It's getting very shiny. You can see me a little clearer in there along with the camera. It's very smooth. It's got a glass-like surface. This is an uneven surface here, so it's kind of wobbly, so it's going to be exactly perfect, but not too bad. So we're done with this, and let's go on with the etching. So the next operation is to actually get down to the etching. So for the etchant, I'm using ferric chloride. I've poured some off into this little container over here so I can get my brush in there. Just using these little cheapo foam brushes. Over here I have distilled water for washing off the acid, and over here some baking soda to neutralize the acid. So let's get busy. So I've cleaned any gunk off the face of the meteorite with some acetone just to kind of clean everything off, any oils, whatnot. So let's get busy. I'm going to put this into the container. Now, this blue box, this plastic box, is going to contain all the liquids that spill, and we'll neutralize the acid afterwards. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, here we go. Now this reaction happens pretty quickly. Start painting this stuff on. Doesn't take a whole lot of acid. I have to pour some more into this little tray here, but it's already starting to take an etch. Look at that. We hear it's already coming out. And what I do normally is do this 2 times. I'll etch it once, kind of do it on both sides, make sure I get all good even coverage. It's coming out pretty nice. Do the other side, I'll wash it off and do it again. The second application seems to really bring out the etch. All right, let's turn this guy over. You can literally see the etch develop right in front of your eyes when you do this. The camera doesn't do it justice. Let's pull this forward a little bit. Make sure I get the other side evenly. Oh my gosh, look at that. Toluca has a very nice Woodman Stoughton pattern to it. It's one of the more attractive patterns I think are out there. I have many slices. This is one of my favorites. Okay. So I think we're ready to wash the first section off. Wow, look at that right there. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, let's wash this off. Over some distilled water. One side, look at that. That's just one application. Not bad for first go. It's beautiful. All right, let's do it a second time. Like I said, this doesn't take very long. It's a very quick process. The second one seems to give it a more of a 3-dimensional look. You can see it's already starting to pop. The other side, the other half of the front side. My oh my, it is beautiful. Okay, this side is about as far as I want to take it. If you do it too much, you could burn the slice and you end up having to go resand it and start all over again. So you have to be very careful. Right, the other way. Okay, I think we're done. That's all I'm going to do. Good. Wash this off again. You'll be able to see the actual contrast in this one is a lot better. Isn't that beautiful? This is way better than it was when I first started. Here's what we have. This is pretty much what it's going to look like once I've dried it and put the protective coat on it. All right, I think we are done. Let's put this aside. Actually, let's finish washing it off a little bit more. A little bit more, just make sure you get all the goop off. Hey. Okay. Let's dry it off a little bit. Clean rag. What I'm going to do next is put this in some alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, and leach out any water that's gotten into the grain. I'm going to do that probably overnight. Come back the next day and dry it off and put a coating on. Okay, it's down here for a moment. So next I want to neutralize any acid that's left on there, so let's sweat it down a little bit. And we're going to put some, I've never done this before, so this is a new, this is the baking soda. Put some of this on there, rub it in. Just make sure there's no, this will neutralize any leftover acid that's on there. As you can see, down the water, it's actually reacting with the diluted acid. Shouldn't be much on here. I washed it off pretty well. Okay, do the other side while we're at it. A bit of water just to wet it down. Baking soda. See how the water's getting brown? That's the acid being neutralized. Okay, I think that will do it. Make sure you get the edges. That looks pretty good. I've never done that before. That was a recommendation by another person that does etching. And I tried it on this piece just to learn some new techniques. All right, wash that off. Okay. One of my favorite parts of doing this process is actually neutralizing the acid. So let's take the brush in there. There's probably still a lot left on there. Pour in the residual. Oh, look at it go. Actually hear the bubbles. Producing carbon dioxide. So put in a little bit more. Put that in there. Put in a little bit more of the CO, or the baking powder. It's already still some left down there. After this is done reacting, I'll just simply wash it out down the sink. Oh yeah, still quite a bit. Now I have a fan going behind me, just to make sure that there's no fumes hanging around. I have that fan going for pretty much the whole process, because I don't like breathing chemicals. Essentially what you're creating, guessing it's rust, which is the brown stuff, CO2. Okay, enough for that. Now I've got a large container to put the piece in. I've dried it off, more or less. And we're going to soak it in some isopropyl alcohol. So let's put that in there. I'm just going to cover it with about a ½ inch of alcohol. Got my 99.9% isopropyl. This should leach out any water that's in there. All right, that's plenty. And we're going to leave that there for at least a day, maybe 2. And then we're going to take it out, heat it up and dry it, and coat it. Well, it's been a day or so now. We're going to take the piece out of the bath, and we're going to dry it off, and then we're going to coat it today. After that, we'll be done. Here's what it's looking like right now. So it looks nice and pretty. Try this guy out. Okay, let's turn it over. So the heating is all done. We're going to let it sit now and cool down before we apply the final coat. The slice is done cooling down, so now it's time to put on the protective coating. So we're going to use this Perfect Match. It's a protective clear coat finish designed for cars, car metal to be specific. So that's what's been recommended, so that's what we're going to use. Let's go ahead and do that. Apply a thin coat first. Turn it around so we get the back. I have the piece sitting off the tile a little ways so we don't get any seeping underneath. Okay, that's all it takes. Let this dry for about 20 minutes, ½ hour. Come back and we'll flip it over and do the other side. All right, I flipped it over and now we're going to do the second side. Turn it around. Okay, we'll let that dry for about ½ hour. Both sides are completely coated now. So here's the final result. Should stay like this for a good long time, hopefully. So I think we're done.